We are joined once again in the Oklahoman's video studio by the Oklahoman's Commissioner of the Department of Labor, Melissa McLawhorn. Houston, great to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
As always, this is the third time you've joined us in the studio this year. It's your first year since succeeding the role that was formerly held by Mark Costello. You were appointed to fill that position by Governor Mary Fallin a year ago. How's it gone in the years since?
It's been really good. It's been a wonderful experience. I am so privileged that I've had the opportunity. As we've talked about before, I mean, it was a difficult position to go into, obviously after such horrific circumstances and being a huge pay cut. But I thought that I had a skill set and a fresh look on things that hopefully could be helpful. So I went into the agency kind of a 30, 60, 90-day plan just to kind of figure out, first where the bathrooms are and then who all is on the staff and then what we do. And then from there, really kind of started digging down into the core mission of the agency and taking a look at, is what we're doing, does it still make sense? Is it still working the way it was designed to work from the beginning?
Did you learn that some of those things were just, hey, this is just the way it's always been done, Commissioner, versus are there some efficiencies that we're just flat out overlooking?
I think that there was a lot of this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
And that is common in bureaucracies.
It's everywhere,
whether
it's government agencies or the local diner.
Right, it's very common. This is the way we've always done it, and it's working. And our staff, to their credit, I think in the beginning when I kind of went on my first elevator inspection, I think they were a little taken aback that I wanted to go on an inspection. But for me, I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand what is it that we do. And once they learned that I really was, trying to learn this area, the shift in, hey, here's an idea I've had, or here's a thought, or here's maybe a way we could do it better, and
or
to
maybe
just
here's
change
someone
that culture.
who's going to listen to if I have a what if we did it this way.
Yeah, and I think coming in from the beginning, stating that I'm not running, and that there is a definitive timeline on the work that we have to do and the time we have to do that work, I think that's helped too. So we focused a lot on, okay, what can we accomplish in 3 years? So I now have 2 years left. What can we accomplish? And the first was really just evaluating what is it that we do. And we uncovered a lot of inefficiencies really through no one's fault. It's just that it's always been done that way. So for example, in asbestos, we had that there was a mandatory, I think, 5 inspections that we had to do. And when I would ask the staff, well, why do we have to do 5? Yeah, but it's kind of always been done that way. I said, well, how many do you do? Well, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 12. It depends upon the site and what the issue is. And so it became, well, why can't we change it? Like, why can't we make it more discretionary? Why do we have to have these mandates?
What does that take to make a change?
Well, it depends. I mean, some of those are statutory. We ended up passing 5 different pieces of legislation this session. Some of it is through rulemaking. And so we're opening up all of the rules for the programs that we regulate. What is really unique about that, though, is that we are involving our stakeholders in that rulemaking. So think about it. I mean, you're a member of an industry that's regulated. To have the opportunity to sit down with your regulator and say, here are some issues that just kind of don't make sense. Frontier City is a facility that is here, 365 days. I mean, they shut down for the winter, and but our whole regulatory system is designed around a traveling out-of-state carnival that's here for 48, 72 hours.
Which is a completely different situation than Frontier City, who is here, as you mentioned, year-round.
Completely different.
Permanent structures.
And so why would we not look at the administrative rules and try and take that into account? I mean, we can schedule the inspections in a different way. I mean, there's different ways that you can approach it, but if we don't have that feedback from industry. And so we set out doing a lot of just kind of industry summits where we would just invite them in and, what issues are you having? Has been a very positive experience. People are, I think, enthusiastic about the opportunity to kind of take a fresh look at things. From there, we'll go into the formal rulemaking process, which is where we'll present the draft rules and gather input of the public and have public notice and hearing, and then they'll go back in front of the legislature again for their approval. But I'm hoping that if the industry has been at the table and has been involved and our staff has been involved, that together we're producing a great product.
Together is probably the right word there.
Very much so.
Last time I ran into you was a month ago. She was here at the Oklahoman upstairs meeting with the editorial board, and they published something October 10th, at that point 11 months into the job. You had looked at perhaps reassessing some of the things the Department of Labor looks at. You mentioned the elevators, you mentioned the amusement rides, but you found some budget. You actually put some dollar amounts to some of the inspections and found some inefficiencies there.
Well, what I found, and again, just taking
or perhaps
kind of
the lack of competition, I think, is what
right.
you're looking at.
So it depends upon the area, but what I found was a couple of the programs are operating at a shortfall. So we're charging a fee that is not sufficient to cover our expenses. So for example, probably the best example is the elevators. We charge $100 to inspect an elevator. Now, Oklahoma City has opted out of our state elevator inspections, and so you have a private market, and you have private elevator inspections. Sometimes those can run as high as $350 for an inspection. Well, why would you ever become a private elevator inspector when the government can always undercut you? So that doesn't make any sense. So the government is being anti-competitive. Meanwhile, the $100 doesn't cover our expenses. So we have a shortfall of almost $600,000 every year.
So where's that $600,000 coming from?
That has to come
Or
from
where's the
state
$100 come
appropriations.
from? Okay.
Comes from state appropriations. And so you have a government that is not covering its cost and is undercutting the private sector. So what do you do to fix that? Well, I think what you do is you raise the fee enough to cover the cost. It won't be $350 because we don't need to make a profit. But maybe it's $250 and we can be there in 3 months versus you could call a private inspector and they'd be there next week. I mean, so now
Sure.
You as a business owner have a little bit more of a balanced market. Our expenses are actually covered and everybody's better off. The final piece of that puzzle though, which is a critical piece, is there are rules that you have to make sure that people are in compliance with. We do have a public safety mission. So for us, if an elevator is dangerous or not able to pass inspection in some way, we need to have a way to issue fines or something to hold people accountable and to get compliance with that rule. Well, but we don't need, again, to profit from that. Because right now it is really tempting for us during this budget situation to say, you know, go find multiple elevators to shut down because we need the revenue, we need the fines. Well, that's not really the way we should be running the agency. So one of the other things we did was we took all of those fines and said that the Department of Labor would not retain them. So now if someone in the amusement ride industry calls us, they know that we're not out there just to play gotcha regulation. Like if there's a fine, there's a reason. Like we have to get compliance, and there are bad actors, I get that. But you have to get compliance, but you shouldn't be profiting from that. And so that's a pretty fundamental change.
Labor Department's not making their quota this month. They're calling us up for the shakedown.
Exactly.
Trying to avoid that sort of look.
Exactly, because look, it is not profitable for members of the private sector to hurt people. It's not profitable for them to hurt their employees or to hurt the members of the public. I mean, they want to do the right thing. Occasionally you will have some bad actors who aren't following the rules, who may be cutting corners for whatever reason. But if they're underbidding somebody else who is in the private sector who's trying to follow the rules, I mean, so there needs to be a compliance from a public safety standpoint, but also from a, you know, fair market competition standpoint.
You noted that, and what you're talking about here, oversight of numerous boards that set licensing requirements, but they don't necessarily report to you or the Labor Department, and sometimes there's no way of follow through, or punishment's not the word, but how do you follow up on stuff like that?
Well, it depends upon...
and perhaps that's a change that needs to happen.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that we're really interested in looking into is all of the licenses that are required in the state of Oklahoma, not just at the Department of Labor. I mean, we have many, but across the state of Oklahoma, there are lots and lots of licenses that are administered in different ways. And so there could be some best practices that other boards in the state are doing that we could replicate. There could be a sharing of resources through technology, for example. I mean, the fact that we still have so many members of the public who have to bring us paper and cash in order to get a license, there probably are some efficiencies there from a technology standpoint that at a state level we could probably share resources. So trying to kind of get your hands around that a little bit, and again, it's just kind of always been done one way. So,
talking with the State Labor Commissioner, Melissa McLawhorn, Houston, looking forward to next year. You mentioned a little bit of the things you have in play and the things to follow up on, but what are you looking at for next year?
So we are really wanting to get into the issue of licensing and try and determine, are we issuing too many licenses, not enough licenses? What are the purposes there? Is public safety being furthered or hampered? Are we serving as a barrier to people getting out of poverty, a barrier to free market? I mean, just kind of some of those fundamental questions. I think the other thing that we'll continue to look at some of the existing programs we have within the Department of Labor and see if that mission is still consistent. One of the other areas that we're talking about is amusement ride safety. And again, the state of Oklahoma, as we've talked about in the past, is one of about only 30 states that regulates amusement rides. Obviously, with the incidents that have happened this summer, there's a real push at a national level to try and do more regulation. And so there's a real opportunity, I think, for Oklahoma to set the example and to serve as the model and to make sure that our definitions and our regulations are, really the best of the best. Especially while it's so topical. And so that's probably another area that we'll drill down on and
Do you
make
think
sure
Oklahoma should still be doing that? You mentioned there's one of 30 states. Should we not?
That was one of those areas that I thought we probably could deregulate when I came in. And as I sat down with members of the industry, many of them felt that it was actually good because it does help to keep kind of those line workers, having a second set of eyes. Looking at those things is helpful. Now, they feel that way if we approach it as a partnership. We have, for example, one inspector who is a level 3 NARSO inspector. What that means is he has to have been inspecting for over 10 years before he can even sit for the NARSO and have 2 recommendations. It's crazy. That's a resource.
Sure.
And so to be able to call on that person and say, hey, have you seen this before? Do you have any ideas of how to address it? That is wonderful. Now, they probably wouldn't feel that way if we were out there saying we've got to meet our fine quota for the year and we're going to fine 20 tickets that we're going to issue you. And so that's why us not retaining those fines is a very important piece of that equation as well. So for right now, I think it makes sense to continue to regulate. I think it makes sense from a partnership approach and making sure that the safety of the public is paramount.
Position of Labor Commissioner in the state up for election in 2018. You have stated before you are not going to run. Still the case?
That's still the case.
Okay.
I think everyone's going to wait until 2018 to see if I'm serious about it. But as I've said before, it's not that I have any opposition to statewide office holding or anything like that. For me, it's just a matter of timing and it's a matter of priority. Right now, our sons are in the 5th and 6th grade. And for my husband and I, it's really a partnership. It takes both of us to kind of stay on top of them and be involved in their lives. So I think there are many people who can be labor commissioner, but only one person who can be their mom. So that needs to be my priority right now.
Good stuff. Before you were labor commissioner, you worked for State Attorney General Scott Pruitt, his office, correct?
Yes, I was his chief of staff.
Okay. Earlier this week, there were headlines that he was going to New York to meet with President-elect Donald Trump. Let's play this out. Let's say that Mr. Pruitt did go to Washington. Would you go to Washington?
I would not go to Washington. Really, it's the same answer as far as why I'm not running for statewide office. My priority is really my family right now, and I think that 5th and 6th grade and 6th and 7th grade, and just those middle school years are really kind of a key developmental time. And so I don't think that's really the time to kind of uproot your family and move them to DC. Plus the fact that my husband is, licensed to practice law here in the state of Oklahoma. So, we want to make sure that we're here. This is our home.
Okay, one last question on the presidential front. We had U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe and State Secretary of Agriculture Jim Reese in yesterday. They were looking ahead to Donald Trump and perhaps less regulation. Is that anything that affects your office? Is that something you would say, yes, less regulation is good, bad? Your thoughts?
Well, I think for me, just philosophically, I think going back to what is the purpose of the regulation is really important, and that's what we've been doing at the Department of Labor. The purpose is public safety. There is some reason that we as a society have decided to regulate this area. What is that reason? Now, when you have a member of the government who uses that regulation to pursue an agenda, because, for example, hypothetically, they might not believe in fossil fuels, and to use that regulation as a way to promote an agenda, that's when things kind of start to go off the rails a little bit, and you have government overreach and out of balance a little bit. So I don't think that there's anything necessarily specific to our agency that we will see. We might in the area of OSHA. I think OSHA has done a couple things that may be taken a look at, but probably one of the other big areas would be the overtime rule. There was a preliminary injunction that was issued just last week, and that was a pretty substantial rule for employees making $47,500 a year. And the preliminary injunction, again, that was a rule that was passed by the U.S. Department of Labor. The preliminary injunction has blocked that rule. There will now be a hearing on whether or not to grant a permanent injunction on that. Those are the kinds of regulations that I think you might start seeing rolling back a little bit. And so even though it doesn't directly impact our agency, I think with the work we do, we'll benefit from some of that as well.
Very good, good stuff. You mentioned the kiddos. I'll get you out of here on this. How was Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving was wonderful. I am very, very proud. We had our 12-year-old who decided to say the prayer this year, and it was a moment that got the grandmothers and the mothers tearing up. So it was very sweet and wonderful to be around the table with my family, my mother, and my in-laws and my brother-in-law. And it's really nice to have everybody so close that we can get together and have those great relationships. So it's nice. We have a small family, but a close family, so it was good.
Those are the good times in life.
Absolutely.
Melissa McLawhorn Houston, she's Oklahoma's Labor Commissioner. Thanks, as always, for stopping in.
Thank you. I appreciate it.